The New York Times told us several times that they would make sure that my story that I was telling came across. They promised several times that they would do it accurately. They told me several times, and my manager several times, that it would not be a hit piece and that my story would come across the way that I was telling it and honestly, and it absolutely was not.
Okay, that is from within the past few hours. That was Roanne Brewer-Lane. She's one of the women profiled in a New York Times story over the weekend on Donald Trump and his relationships with women, his behavior toward women, more specifically. Trump's former girlfriend saying that her quotes in the Times article were twisted into a hit piece. Now, in the last few minutes, we have a response to what she is now saying from the New York Times. This is from a spokesperson for the paper saying, quote, Ms. Brewer-Lane was quoted fairly, accurately, and at length. The story provides context for the reader, including that the swimsuit scene was the start of a whirlwind romance between Ms. Brewer-Lane and Mr. Trump. Let's bring in Hugh Hewitt, conservative commentator, national syndicated radio talk show host. Well, Hugh, I'm trying to make sense of this one. I mean, we could put this up on the screen. The headline from this article was Crossing the Line. How Donald Trump behaved with women in private. The woman we're talking about here, Roanne Brewer-Lane, was the lead anecdote they used in this story. She's saying he was a gentleman. These are her words. She's saying he was a gentleman toward me. There were no issues. I had no problem with him whatsoever. The Times twisted this. You heard the Times statement there. This is from the last few minutes. What's your reaction to it?
My reaction to the New York Times is not covering itself in glory here, Steve. My first reaction when I saw the piece yesterday was, I wonder if there's any similar piece on Bill Clinton from May of 1992. And of course there isn't. There was some coverage of Jennifer Flowers, but no in-depth reporting on Bill Clinton's past relationship with women to whom he was not married. So I think the double standard is already at play. And then to have one of your key participants in the story step forward and say that she has been mischaracterized on the morning after is a significant hit on the New York Times. I'd also add that this morning on Morning Joe, the name Jeffrey Epstein came up for the first time. And Bill Clinton, Jeffrey Epstein, that's not a Google search that the Clinton campaign really wants to have people undertaking on a daily basis. So at the end of this news cycle, or halfway through this news cycle, I don't think it's helping Hillary Clinton to be talking about the past infidelities or alleged improprieties of any candidate or their spouse right now.
Well, let me ask you, too, we've spent so much time since Donald Trump locked up the nomination asking, can the Republican Party unify? Can he bring this party together? I wonder, listening to your reaction to this, I imagine this is something you're probably hearing from your listeners as well. Is this the kind of thing that rallies Republicans, rallies conservatives around Donald Trump? Just this idea that, hey, the media is out to get us. They're trying to take down, you know, our candidate, our front runner. Does this help Donald Trump unify the Republican Party?
Very savvy, Steve. In fact, it does. I've got my concerns with Donald Trump. I want the tax returns released. I want him to put a young and hopefully female appointee on the vice presidential ticket. I want to know who he's going to put on the Supreme Court. I'm not part of Never Trump, but I'm also not committed to Mr. Trump yet because he hasn't fulfilled some commitments he's made to me. On the other hand, when I read the Facebook story about the curation that went on of their news feed, when I see Google News this morning leading all over with the Trump interview with Piers Morgan, but not leading with the questions about Mrs. Clinton and the double standard or the repudiation of the Times story, it does get all those old juices flowing that the Clinton machine has been protected and camouflaged by mainstream media for decades now. And she has been around in the public eye since 1992. So I think people need to focus on that. And when I see President Obama at Rutgers being as divisive as he was and suggesting that Donald Trump is ignorant, well, there are a lot of things you can say about Donald Trump. I've interviewed him 15 times and been on 4 debate stages with him. He isn't ignorant. And I'd love to see he and President Obama talk about the science, for example, of engineering and architecture and see who would unwin that duel. So I do think that the Democrats are going to do a good job of bringing Republicans together. Reince Priebus was on my radio show this morning making that very point. There's some healing to do on the Republican side, but boy, days like this, the Facebook, the Times story, makes it a lot easier.
All right, conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt, thanks for the time.
Thanks, Steve.